Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week,
everything that we have in team sports is there already to help people. And again, not just to get through the difficult times, but to bring people together so that they feel complete.
That's why it's important that it's an open conversation, isn't it? That if there are fears, there are thoughts, there are sort of ongoing issues that people are having, but cricket is having that conversation in an open way.
A Saturday or Sunday, you're there for most of the day. You might train during the week, social events. Something's going right in so many clubs in this region and across the country, and that can be celebrated. It is good for people's mental health.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday.
The home of the UK's conversation about mental health. Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. I appreciate your streams and your downloads and being part of the podcast as we discuss mental health each and every week, and got a really poignant and appropriate conversation for you this week, and it comes off the back of the death of the news of the England and Surrey cricketing legend Graham Thorpe. Now, if you have followed your sport over the years, you'll know exactly who Graham Thorpe is. If you've not, it's just one of those mainstays within the cricketing world, both as a cricket player, but then as part of like the England coaching setup, and a huge name within the game, with an incredible record within the game as well. And news emerged at the start of the month of August 2024 that he had died, which was, of course, really sad news. Now, at the start of last week, his family made a public statement about the fact that his death was related to the mental illness that he'd been suffering from a number of years, things like depression and anxiety. And I thought it was incredible that his family took those steps, because at a time like that, you could completely understand why they would choose to just keep themselves to themselves. But they wanted to make people aware of the reason, to share the reason why he's no longer with us. And I guess hope that it might inspire a conversation in the world of cricket and beyond, to have a conversation if you are struggling, and to know that the effects of illnesses like this can be absolutely devastating to individuals, to families, to communities, to the world of cricket, or whichever organisation or world that people are part of. The ramifications are really far-reaching. And back on episode 27, believe it or not, of Mental Health Monday, I met the team behind Opening Up Cricket, which was about using cricket as a way to talk about mental health. And I thought it would be a really great opportunity to revisit that organisation, who in the last, 6 years or so, have been travelling around the country, going into cricket clubs, not just to talk about mental health within a cricket environment, but to use cricket as a means to get into those conversations, to almost make it an excuse to have that conversation, and to use cricket as a means to talk about mental health so that you are empowered to have that conversation. Or if you don't feel like you're the right person to have that conversation, at least to know where to turn if that conversation is required. Mark Boyns set it up, and if you listen back to episode 27, he tells the full story about why the organisation was set up in the northwest of England, but now they travel all around the country. Just as I spoke to Mark, he'd been doing workshops in Devon, so right across the cricketing world, the Opening Up Cricket team are doing really fantastic work. OpeningUpCricket.com is the website where you can find out some more information about him, but we start off by talking about the fact that the family didn't need to talk about the reasons for Graham's death, but they obviously felt that by letting people know what had happened to him, that maybe some good could potentially come from that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it wasn't something that was perhaps expected, because even now in 2024, suicide is something which is still rarely discussed, even in a world where mental health awareness appears at least to be something which is a topic. Suicide is still something which is very much ignored, probably for fear of what it might bring up and how difficult it can be to talk about it. So for people like Graham Thorpe's family, in what must have been a very raw and emotional time for them, to do that has been such a gift to other people to really think about this. And of course, it'll affect everyone in different ways. People who didn't know him, who were just fans who watched him on the television or in the ground, would still have had some element of being impacted by it, because even though we're aware of the statistics around suicide, it's something we don't expect to happen, particularly when it's someone who's had a successful career that a lot of people would look on with jealousy or envy even.
And I remember when, and this is going back sort of 20, 25 years, there was talk about Marcus Trescothick and a conversation about mental health, because players, as part of their sort of cricketing routine, were spending many, many months away from family and you know, those long away sort of test matches for sometimes months and months at a time. And that was sort of a conversation. I don't think anyone's sort of been negative about cricket as such in regard to what happened to Graham Thorpe. But without a doubt, and you'll know this because of the work you've done over many, many years now, that cricket is part of society. And because part of society is suicide, those two will invariably meet at times.
Yeah. And we do get quite a lot of comments when tragedies happen and when there's high profile, or even not necessarily high profile, but instances of people in the game having time out or complete breaks or retirement or real struggles linked to their mental health. People do look for a link with cricket specifically and say, what is it about the sport? And there are some things which are definitely worth thinking about. The statistical nature of the game, it's very easy to deduce failure rather than just a journey that people are going on in their career. And also, as you've mentioned, those time constraints on people, as in that they'll have little downtime in the professional game with all the travel. But some of those stresses that can happen to people, they might happen to be in cricket, but you can transfer that for a lot of jobs and a lot of things that happen. So we've always tried at Open at Cricket to push the positives of the sport, particularly in the recreational game, that you get this opportunity to satisfy all of those ways to well-being through our sport. But it's not, of course, pushing away where problems can be linked to the sport or some of the demands of it or some of the challenges. And that's part of the discussion about mental health. It's about saying, well, what do we reckon we could improve on, or what could be mitigated against to make sure that we look after people better?
That's why it's important that it's an open conversation, isn't it? That if there are fears, there are thoughts, there are sort of ongoing issues that people are having, that cricket is having that conversation in an open way, in a way that maybe a sport like rugby league has done in the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Well, in fact, as I was saying earlier, Mick, I'm in Devon at the moment, and I was chatting with people last night and said rugby league has just led the way on this for so long. And I always tend to mention it when I'm in parts of the country where it's not so traditional rugby league areas. But they got it, these people I was chatting with yesterday. I was explaining the State of Mind campaign, things that are done in Super League. And in a sport where you might imagine that there'd be a macho barrier to people talking about how they feel, they've got through that in a lot of ways. I'm sure there's still challenges there. But if it can happen there, I think every other sport or walk of life or area where people come together can do something to do what effectively is so simple sounding but can be difficult, and is get people more comfortable with talking about how they feel. And that doesn't just have to be the struggles, it can be the good stuff. And that's one end of mental health, the joy and the satisfaction we get from sport and sharing that with people, as well as when we need support and where to get it and what people can do in the short term for their friends before they might direct them toward somewhere that can professionally help.
How much of the work you do is based around the fact that it's not just about cricket, but actually what you're doing is you're speaking to a group of individuals who are united by this particular community of this particular sport, which forms this community? And although Opening Up Cricket is about cricket and mental health within cricket, if you guys were all into badminton, it'd be about badminton, it'd be about tennis, it'd be about something else. That actually these organisations and the work you're doing is not just specifically related to what happens on a cricket pitch. It's actually about the fact that this is a space that groups of people, particularly men, increasingly more so women, are coming into, and it's a community space where you can have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. The community is the absolute key. And like I mentioned a couple of moments ago, the ways to wellbeing, the 5 of them: connect, be active, keep learning, give, and take notice. Well, the one which stands out always is connect. The fact that everything that we have in team sports is there already to help people. And again, not just to get through the difficult times, but to bring people together so that they feel, and this is going to sound a bit cliche, but almost so they feel complete. There's not just them isolated as one individual, but being part of something bigger than themselves. So when you have team sport as a vehicle, you don't need to push too hard to let people know what the benefits are in so many ways. And if you frame it in terms of mental health, hopefully they can see that more easily than in somewhere where you're trying to generate a community that doesn't already exist.
In terms of the clubs that you obviously are invited to, what do they say to you about maybe what's gone before in terms of mental health provision? Do they say, we've never done this before, we thought we should do something about it, some committee members weren't sure we should bother doing this, that's all? Is there sort of like a natural not really sure about this, or is that a conversation which is opening up and cricket clubs understand that maybe they've got to have some sort of provision in place?
Yeah, I think it has developed over the years that it's now a lot more clubs getting in touch for their own reasons rather than them responding to effectively a cold call or some kind of contact. And I'd say that their motivation for doing it usually falls into a couple of categories. One would be they have this general understanding that might have been prompted by sport or something else in their life where they think, look, this is something we can do to really benefit our members. They're looking at it proactively and saying, yeah, what could we do that makes the most of what we've got and helps us look after people who, in cricket, of course, we end up spending a lot of time with. And then on the other side, it does tend to be where something may have happened and they feel that they need to do something to respond to it. It could have been players having stopped playing because of their health, and something else that might be going on elsewhere in their community where they feel they've just been they noticed that it's important. Or we still, of course, regrettably get ones where someone has been lost in their club and to suicide, and they want to do something to, I guess, look after the members who are left behind and try and prevent something like that happening in the future.
Can I ask you about sort of headed into a weekend of fixtures, for instance, that we've got coming? Without a doubt, every single player in every single team will know about the Graham Thorpe story. Some will bring it up, others won't bring it up. Without a doubt, though, that it'll be on everybody's mind in some way, shape, or form. What's the appropriate thing, do you think, for a club to do in a circumstance like that, where you say, look, this big thing has happened, this terrible thing has occurred, and we're aware that this has happened within, the cricketing world, and it's shaken the cricketing world to a certain extent. What's an appropriate response, do you think, for clubs heading into a fixture weekend?
Well, first and foremost, I think having the ability to talk about it is probably the main thing. Now, it's easy unless someone's present at a post-mortem to speculate about very specific things. People can get caught up in that or start to hypothesize about what led to it in the short and long term. And of course, that sort of happens with people. But I think in general, from a club's perspective, whether they want to actively encourage it by referring to it and asking people how they think this applies to them, what their feelings are in relation to it. And it could be something that there's people's reflections on, what a wonderful player he was, the great memories that he gave people, and the sadness that someone has died in that way, but also what it might mean for them as a club. Even a discussion about how the professional game is so different to the recreational game. And, in some ways, thankfully, we don't have the pressures that have existed in that. But also just, I think probably the most important one, and one I'll try and have wherever I am this weekend, is thinking about what do we think if that's our teammate, a former teammate that we had, someone that we used to play with, and we get the news that they've died in that way. What would we want to do to try and prevent that, or to try and let other people know that we take it seriously? So someone speaking out in a club to say what happened with Graham Thorpe just is so tragic, and what can we do to make people know that we're there for them? And again, like I said before, it's not about trying to work out exactly what happened with Graham and things like that, but just to say in a general way, this has reminded us of the prevalence of death by suicide and how 12 men a day die in the UK, and what can we do to think about how that could affect someone at our club. And just those discussions, they're not formatted in a certain way. very loose, but maybe encouraging people to have that space to talk about it and what it means to them.
And in terms of putting something in place, which is maybe a little bit more structured, bringing in an outside organisation, you guys are not really outside because you're very, very much based within the cricket world. But what would like an opening up session be like for maybe clubs who are a little bit uncertain as to whether or not people would engage with it? How do you fit that into sort of a regular sort of cricket club?
Yeah, well, typically we'll come at the end of a training session, so players are already there, and there's perhaps members at the club who aren't players as well. And typically we'll do about half an hour on 3 themes, and then if possible throughout that or after have some discussion, because really the overarching theme is that we want people to talk. So it's great if I can come in and talk a bit from my experience and what we know at Open Up Cricket, but really it's about the people in the club then taking it forward. And the 3 themes that we look at are how we use mental skills in cricket and how they transfer into the rest of our lives. So the bonus of playing cricket for your mental health. Also the middle bit, perhaps the most important, looking out for our teammates and some lessons that people have learned for good or for bad across the world of the sport. And then the signpost into what we actually can do to make sure that we're doing the right thing for someone if we do know that they're not quite right and they need some help, which can often be the off-putting thing for people. They maybe don't want to get into a conversation because they're worried they've got to fix it or do something about it. But when someone's physically injured, we don't expect to treat them. We might get them off the field to make sure they're safe, but then get them towards someone who can help, who knows what they're doing. And we try and apply that parallel to the mental side of it.
No, fantastic stuff. We'll put a link to openingupcricket.com on the podcast notes. And can I ask you, Mark, I mean, people can go back now to episode 27, believe it or not, of Mental Health Monday for when we first met, and you were talking about things being very much in their formative state. Can I ask you, though, just on a personal level, when the family made the statement about Graham's death, and obviously people can go and hear the reasons why Open Up Cricket was sort of set up, was there a moment for you there where you were taken back to when you got the news about the teammate that you lost?
Yeah. It's inevitable, I guess, simply because of that parallel of it being something in cricket related to suicide. I read it and I was struck by a couple of things. One, there's a quote from the family saying they're really, I can't quote it directly, but to paraphrase, they're saying they're really glad that they can remember him for what he was before the illness took over, and thinking about him as a whole person rather than just the way he died. And that really touched me to think about, for all the people I've spoken to over the years who've lost someone to suicide, it's so easy for people to just characterize that person by how they died rather than thinking about all of the lovely memories before that. So that really touched me. And also there was an article on ESPN Cricinfo where the headline was that, again, words to the effect that Graham Thorpe would never know how much he was loved by people. And that's the really heartbreaking thing, that we have people die by whatever way, and people are at a funeral talking about all the things they loved about them, and they didn't say it to them while they were alive. I've been there. I've been at a funeral where I heard all these lovely things, and it's like, no one ever mentioned that to him, not in the group that I knew this person in. So it's a reminder also, yeah, of course, there's the things that come up about suicide and the tragedies and all the questions that come up, but also about what we do while people are with us, whether they're struggling or not, to let them know we care. And cricket is that, for me, just like this vehicle of such strength to be able to make those connections and just cut through a little bit of the bluster sometimes about where it's default to make fun of each other, and it can be funny and it is amusing and it is part of team spirit and bonding, but at the right time, at the appropriate time, however we say it in our own words, to let people know that we care.
No, thank you for that. And no, really appreciate that response. And I guess that sort of helps us wrap things up, that, you know, cricket's not without its faults in terms of, you know, some of its structural issues, and they've been sort of very public in the last couple of years as well. But quite clearly from the work you've done over many, many years now, Mark, cricket can actually be a big part of the solution, because it is a place where people come together. It is a place of community. It is a place of friendship. Yeah,
and I would say to any clubs or people from clubs that are listening, that I think what can put people off engaging with this topic is they think it's just going to be about the problems and the negatives and another thing in their in tray to deal with as a committee, when in actual fact, it can be a really positive experience to think, what do we do well? We've got all these members at our clubs who are coming along to play cricket, coming on to watch, to be involved in other capacities. We must be doing something right that keeps people coming back for a lot of time as well. A Saturday or Sunday, you're there for most of the day. You might train during the week, social events. Something's going right in so many clubs in this region and across the country, and that can be celebrated. It is good for people's mental health. Yes, of course, as you've said, there's things that might not work and things that we could do better at, but overwhelmingly for me, and I wouldn't do it otherwise, cricket is a positive and should be celebrated for that.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you so much for your time. We'll put a link to openingupcricket.com on the podcast notes. Good luck with the work that you're continuing to do across the sport. I'm sure that will continue for many years. There's some fantastic merch, by the way, on Mark's website, so people can head on there and support the organisation. And also get in touch if you are from a cricket organisation and you want to get Mark's expertise and some of the sessions that they've got going on. Mark will be able to give you all the details on that front. Thank you for joining us on Mental Health Monday.
Thanks, Mick.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.